go to the second location. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. You are listening to episode 60, The Dark Days of Dryden, New York, The Cheerleaders. This is a part 3 episode. If you have not listened to part 1 and part 2, I would go back and do that first before you listen to episode 60. In this episode, we will return to the small town of Dryden, New York, a place steeped in tragedy. A town most commonly referred to as the Village of the Damned. As always, listener discretion is advised. Two beloved cheerleaders, best friends, and rising stars are missing on game day. The town now finds itself under the shadow of a curse that many believe has haunted it for years. In part 1 and part 2, we examined the unsettling murders of the Harris family, Eliza Mae Bush, Scott Hume, Stephen Starr, the tight-knit community's suspicions, and the growing list of eerie coincidences that point to something far darker at play. Are the murders just coincidence, or is there truly a malevolent force at work in Dryden, New York? The murders of Sarah and Jennifer rocked the town of Dryden. The tragedy cast a long shadow over local events, and for many years afterward, the loss of the two young girls remained a painful topic of conversation. While details surrounding the case have been somewhat limited due to the passage of time, I can provide an overview of the case, its impact on the local community, and the pursuit of justice for the victims. My two main sources for this episode were an article written by journalist E. Jean Carroll titled The Cheerleaders, a true story about a 5-year string of murders, accidents, and suicides in a small New York town. And then, of course, the documentary series titled Village of the Damned. On August 20th, 1995, the town is struck with sadness again when 19-year-old Billy Pace dies in a car accident. Billy was in the back seat of a car when his 19-year-old friend hit a curve and drove off the road. A tragic car accident where a family loses a son. Then, a year later, Scott Pace, Billy's brother, is driving home from football practice in his girlfriend's car, and that same family loses another son in a car crash. "14 days after Scott Pace's tragic death, Ed Bailey walks into work and shoots his friend and boss, Bob Bergman. A completely unexpected tragedy, but was it? Because Ed Bailey's wife, Donna Bailey, she admits that she saw the spark gone in her husband's eye. Donna said her husband Ed used to be so crazy, fun, and full of life. And then in 1985, the family moves outside of Dryden, New York. This is when Donna says, Ed wasn't so full of life anymore. You could see the dullness covering him. His eyes aren't shiny, they're darker. Donna and Ed Bailey had 3 young sons. Ed was in the National Guard, and he told his wife that if he was ever off with the Guard on a mission, and if anything ever happened to him, that she should not believe it. This was her first sign that Ed was becoming a little different. He would tell her that the TV was giving him subliminal messages. He would say that the black crows outside the windows were watching him. Things started feeling a little scary for Donna. Ed was locking her in the car, telling her that they were all going to die. Soon, she gets Ed admitted to a psychiatric hospital. She believes Ed's going to get the help that he needs, and he will stay in this hospital for most likely a couple of months, and then he'll be back with the family. But one day, Donna is at home with her 3 sons, and Ed is just standing in the front yard. He starts walking to the front door. He comes into the home and he tells Donna that the doctor said he could go home because nothing is wrong with him. Donna explains to the docuseries Village of the Damned that her husband was really good at charming people. He had a great personality. He could fool anyone. No one knew what his dark side was like at home. In 1996, the Bailey family goes on a camping trip, and on this trip, they will meet Bob Bergman and his family. Bob had 2 young girls and soon became BFFs with the Bailey family. He even got Ed his job at Stafford Chevrolet. Donna thought her husband was happy. Everything seemed to be going great. He had a job now. He had something to focus on. Soon after starting the job at Stafford Chevrolet, Ed asks Donna if he could buy a gun. He explains to his wife that this gun would be for hunting, so she says yes. Ed comes home from work one night and tells his wife that he is very upset because he got into an argument with Bob at Stafford Chevrolet. The 2 friends just had a rough day at work on a Friday, so Ed goes home that weekend. And he thinks he's going to get over it as the weekend goes along, but it just gets more and more intense in his brain. He is still so pissed that Bob yelled at him. But he wakes up Monday morning, drives to work, and Donna believes everything's going to be okay. That is until Donna receives a phone call. From Stafford Chevrolet, she hears her husband on the other end of the phone line, and all he whispers to her is, "I shot Bob." On September 24th, 1996, Ed Bailey shot and killed his best friend and coworker, Bob Bergman. Ed Bailey received 25 years in prison, and he was released on parole in July of 2017. October 4th, 1996, it is a Friday night. Friday night lights, the night of the big game, the Dryden Lions are playing, but 2 16-year-old cheerleaders are missing. They are missing from school, and they are missing for the big game right now. Sarah Hajney and Jen Bolduc were 16-year-old best friends, both cheerleaders, both attend Dryden High. There is no way that these 2 are going to miss this game and not give anyone an explanation as to why. According to Tiffany Starr, daughter of Steven Starr,
being a cheerleader at Dryden is the closest thing to being a movie star as you can get. It's like being a world-class gymnast, movie star, and model all in one. It is fabulous. Fabulous. It is so much fun because we rule.
So there's no way that these 2 are missing that game. On the cheerleading squad, Jen was a base, and she would support the flyers. Sarah was a flyer, so Sarah gets thrown in the air. When Tiffany Starr was interviewed by E. Jean Carroll, she said of Jen that she was a great cheerleader, a great athlete, really strong and happy, always laughing. She was very creative, silly, goofy, determined. She was always being funny. She never spoke a bad word about anyone. Sarah Hajney was on the varsity track team. She volunteered with children with special needs. A former Dryden football player named Johnny Lopinto says of Sarah, she's a knockout. Sarah's parents were away, so Jen and Sarah were going to be having a sleepover at Sarah's house. It was just going to be the girls, and their friend Katie Savino was also supposed to be at this sleepover, but at the last minute, Katie decided she couldn't go, so girls' night was just going to be Jen and Sarah. but highly unusual for these two cheerleaders to not show up to a game. So at this point, cops are called and they are doing a wellness check on Jen and Sarah. Police enter the Hajney home to find the bathroom is destroyed. The shower curtain is off of the rack. The dish soap holder is ripped off of the wall. On a towel rack in the side of the room, you can see Jennifer's purple and white cheerleading skirt just hanging. Sarah's skirt is later discovered twirled over a drying rack in the basement. Sarah's parents were in Bar Harbor, Maine for a 4-day vacation, but had left the Chevy Lumina for Sarah to use. The Chevy was missing from the Hajney's front driveway. Sarah and Jen are nowhere to be found, and foul play is immediately suspected. Residents must pass through police checkpoints in town. Hours are passing. There are no signs of the two girls. Police get their first big break on Saturday, October 5th, 1996. The Hajney's Chevy Lumina is found outside of Dryden in a parking lot. It is found in Cortland County, and employees from a business nearby, the Cortland Line Company, say that they saw a suspicious man wearing long yellow gloves. Witnesses describe the gloves as yellow dishwashing gloves. Police arrive on the scene. They search the Chevy Lumina. Inside the trunk, investigators find mud, pine needles, charred wood, blood, and diamond-patterned fingerprints that suggest the abductor was wearing these dishwashing gloves. Police are now on the hunt for this suspicious man that the employees at the Cortland Line Company saw. Sarah's home was located in the village of McLean, so the police are canvassing the neighborhood and immediately notice that Sarah's next-door neighbor is acting kinda shady. This neighbor's name is John Andrews. Now, John Andrews lived so close to Sarah's house that you could look directly down into Sarah's kitchen from John's window. John is acting a little creepy, but tells police that he was home alone all night with his wife. He does say that his wife left the home for a couple of hours, so he was there by himself for a little bit. So who is this John Andrews that lives next door to Sarah Hajney? John Andrews is a 31-year-old married man with one son. It is said by the community that back in the day, back in his high school days, John was shy. As a child, John's father won a Purple Heart during one of his 3 tours in Vietnam. In the article, The Cheerleaders by Carroll, John's dad is described as a, quote, USA all the way kind of religious alcoholic who believes in the belt and is strict about his rules. John's father was known to be abusive towards John and his sisters, Anne and Deborah. John had a high school sweetheart named Patricia McGorry. He married her young, and then he joined the Air Force. While stationed in Germany, John is arrested because he had this thing for wearing a ski mask and gloves and attacking 2 separate women. John even broke into one of his friend's homes, wore a ski mask and gloves, and attacked this friend's wife. John does his time for these crimes, and then he is set free to move to Dryden, New York. John and wife Patricia buy a home in McLean, and John gets a job working at the Paul Trinity Micro Corporation in Cortland. In August 1996, the Hajneys purchased the house next door to John Andrews. And John Andrews becomes obsessed with young Sarah. Now, John Andrews sure looks suspicious, but right at this moment, they do not have enough evidence to charge John with anything. Police will soon get their biggest break 30 miles east of Dryden in Otselic, New York. A woman named Anne Erxelben and her fiancé Bruno Couture own a cabin in Otselic, New York, and they would rent this cabin out to their friends from time to time. It was a small hunting cabin. So on this night, Anne's friend Marcus wants to use the cabin for the weekend. He's up at the cabin and the whole place is just completely dark. Marcus shines a light into the cabin and notices a puddle in the middle of the floor, shines his flashlight onto that puddle and realizes that this is not a puddle. This is a pool of blood. Marcus immediately calls his friend Anne to let her know that something's going on in the cabin and he would like her to come up and check it out because he doesn't think that this feels right, especially knowing that these two 16-year-old girls are missing. So Anne and her fiance drive to the cabin. They get there and they decide they need to get to the troopers' barracks in Norwich, which they do, and no one is there. So now they call the police, and when the police arrive, a trooper goes inside of the cabin. He's in there for a little bit. He comes back out, and all he says to Anne is, "Do you know anyone from McLean?" And Anne says, "Yeah, friends and family." The trooper then says, "Do any of your friends or family live next door to Sarah Hajney?" And she responds, "Yes, my brother, John Andrews." Inside of this small rustic cabin in the middle of the woods, police find blood everywhere. There is a small pond in front of the cabin, and police believe that maybe they could find a weapon in the pond, but no weapon is ever found, and while searching the surrounding areas, police discover the scattered remains of Sarah Hajney and Jennifer Bolduc. On Tuesday, October 8th, 1996, John Andrews is arrested. John is not going to talk to police, and John will never tell anyone what actually happened on that night of October 4th, 1996. Police can only speculate as to how the night went. John Andrews, weighing 250 pounds, wearing yellow gloves and a brown ski mask, enters the house through an unlocked kitchen door. He is carrying 6 knives and plastic ties. He binds Sarah with the plastic ties and duct tape, and we don't even know if he knew that Jen was there. He will then drive to the cabin in Ottselic, New York. At the cabin, he builds a fire, tortures the girls, cuts them into pieces, drives back down Wright Road, and throws their body parts out of the window of the car. He dumps motor oil all over himself and the car to hide evidence, then leaves the car in the parking lot, then tosses the yellow dishwashing gloves into a trash can. Major Foley of the New York State Trooper Headquarters says, "Well, I will tell you what. Here is something we will never go into, the details of the torture of those 2 lovely girls." Sarah and Jennifer are buried in a cemetery 100 feet from Sarah's home. Looking for answers as to why her brother committed such a crime has not been easy for Anne. When Anne spoke with journalist E. Jean Carroll, she asked this question: what makes us do things? What makes us not do things? What pushed my brother over the edge? The police tell us it was some kind of woman hate crime because of the way the bodies were mutilated. John Andrews' father died by suicide in 1985. He was accused of sexually abusing young girls and then killed himself with a 12-gauge shotgun. And on Saturday, November 2nd, 1996, after being indicted on 26 counts of murder, kidnapping, aggravated sexual abuse, auto theft, burglary, and criminal possession of a weapon, John Andrews hung himself in his jail cell with his shoelaces. According to a 1996 New York Times article, The Tompkins County Sheriff, Emery Guest, said that John Andrews had appeared somewhat withdrawn but not suicidal. John was not under constant surveillance, but he was being checked by guards every 15 minutes. John was even playing cards with fellow prisoners the same night that he died by suicide. Notes were found inside of John's cell. The notes were written to his family, and the notes said that he was very sorry, but there was nothing in any of these letters that talked about the crime. He didn't apologize for what he did to the girls. He apologized for what he did to his family. John's wife was staying at her parents' house while all of this was going on, so police go to her parents' home to tell her that John had killed himself in the jail cell. The wife was crying hysterically, but Patricia's father stood up and said, "Good." Katie Savino, the BFF of Sarah and Jennifer, the friend that decided not to sleep over Sarah's house that night, graduated from Dryden High School and went on to the State University of New York at Oswego. Katie Savino is described as a dynamo full of positive energy. She had a megawatt smile. On June 11th, 1999, Katie Savino was killed in a car accident. At the time of the accident, Cheryl Thayer was 19 years old. She was Katie's best friend. On this night, Katie and Cheryl were celebrating the fact that Cheryl was going to be leaving for California soon, so the two girls wanted to go out and have a girls' night, but they were too young to drink and they were refused service in every bar. But the two girls continued to sneak drinks from their friends, drink out of their friends' drinks. Cheryl ended up getting behind the wheel and driving the friends home. She says, "I didn't see the stop sign and we got hit by the truck. It was so dark." Cheryl Thayer was arrested on charges of second-degree manslaughter, and she was indicted on charges of second-degree manslaughter, second-degree vehicular manslaughter, and criminally negligent homicide in Cortland County Court. She was also indicted on charges by state police of second-degree vehicular manslaughter, driving while intoxicated, 2 misdemeanor charges of third-degree assault, driving with a blood alcohol content greater than 0.10, operating a motor vehicle at an unreasonable speed, failure to stop at a stop sign, and failure to keep right. Cheryl Thayer pleaded guilty to killing her best friend, Katie Savino. She was sent to the Tioga County Jail in Oswego, New York. 2,300 people attended the memorial service for Katie. Katie was always haunted by what happened to her two best friends, by the fact that she was supposed to be at that house. Katie Savino is buried next to her friends Sarah and Jennifer. Cheryl Thayer spoke with journalist E. Jean Carroll. Before Cheryl went back to her cell after this interview, she said to the journalist, "Katie escaped fate the first time by not spending the night at Sarah's, but fate made sure it met Katie." That sounds to me like Cheryl blaming this on something else other than the fact that she was driving drunk. And I know this whole thing sounds like something out of Final Destination, but how insensitive of Cheryl to say that. As time passed, the curse that had once gripped the town began to fade through the resilience of the townspeople. They rebuilt their lives. They carried an unspoken understanding that the real power lay not in this so-called curse, but in their ability to persevere together. The curse was broken, not by force, but by the collective strength of a community determined to shape its own fate. The town of Dryden, New York had learned that while darkness may come, it can always be overcome by the light of hope and unity. And you know what I always say, stay paranoid. No matter how close-knit your community is, no matter how lovely you think your neighbors are, sometimes we can never truly know who we live next door to. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Residue. I do appreciate you all so very much. Residue is hosted, created, edited, researched, produced by me, Chrissy Champagne. If you felt like it, the easiest thing to do to help out the show would be to just share the episodes, share the social media post. You can find me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, Facebook Residue a True Crime Podcast, TikTok Residue Podcast, and leaving a 5-star review is probably the best gift that you could ever give any podcaster in your life. It really helps others find your show. It helps us to understand what you like about the show, what we should keep doing. I cannot wait to see you all again next Tuesday. And don't forget to hit that follow button at the top of this screen that you're listening to this episode on. Because if you hit that follow button, then you're going to know that a new episode pops up every Tuesday at midnight. You guys are the best. Please stay safe and stay paranoid.